facing Australia's electricity grid. Not only are we experiencing a changing mix in the source of electricity generated, but consumer preferences are also changing.
The desperate need to resolve the policy uncertainty in energy policy that has bedeviled this country since 2009.
Hello, and welcome to About the House. The Environment and Energy Committee recently tabled its final report into modernising Australia's electricity grid. We joined Committee Chair Andrew Broad and Deputy Chair Pat Conroy outside the chamber to discuss the findings of their inquiry.
The Australian electricity grid is Australia's biggest machine, and anything you do with Australia's biggest machine means that it's going to take a long time. So long-term planning, and if you're going to have long-term planning, you've got to have certainty. What we've seen for so long in the energy debate has been what's going to happen in 3 years, followed by another 3 years, by another 3 years, because of the nature of the parliament. What we've endeavoured to do with this report is say, let's park the politics, let's talk about what are the framework we need to ensure that as we build Australia's biggest machine, that'll be everything we want from it over the next 20 years.
Energy policy has been a contested issue in Australian politics for some time, but the committee was able to set aside its political differences and work collegiately to produce a unanimous report.
I don't think you could get people with more divergent views on energy policy than Craig Kelly and myself or Adam Bant and Andrew.
They're the real extremes.
Yeah, it's all over the shop. But besides parking very heated issues where we said we're not going to agree, we just can't agree, and it'll be counterproductive to have the committee dominated by those debates, there were issues where we had different views, and it was actually expert evidence that drew out, well, what really is the evidence, and whether it's on system security, whether renewables can provide inertia, whether there's adequate planning. I think everyone's views, it's fair to say, changed slightly as a part of this process, and everyone moved closer to where I think expert evidence was provided.
On top of recommending an end to policy uncertainty on emissions reduction, the report makes a number of other recommendations. We asked Mr Broad and Mr Conroy about the changes they would most like to see in Australia's power grid.
Well, I think the nature of the grid has been essentially a generation source, which has largely been a coal-fired power generation source, and then arteries and veins that feed out with that. And we're now swinging that on its head, where you're actually generating where there's sun resources, where there's wind resources. I think some really good feasibility studies about interconnectors, put in the right place that capture our renewable energy resources, is something that's very dear to my heart, because that opens up economic activity in regional Australia, but also changes the future of how we generate for the grid for years to come.
And for me, recommendation 16 around renewable energy zones is the critical one besides uncertainty. Getting adequate planning and investment in renewable energy zones not only will help modernise our grid, it means that we can resume our place as a energy export superpower, a land of cheap energy, a land of cleaner energy, and I think that's in everyone's interest as long as people are convinced that it can be reliable and it can be cheap. And I think with that investment and planning, we can definitely do that because we're blessed with some of the greatest natural resources around solar radiation and wind energy and geothermal in the world.
With the report tabled in Parliament, it now falls to the Minister for the Environment to respond on behalf of the government. Like all committee reports, this could form the basis of new legislation. Thanks for watching. You can read the report by visiting aph.gov.au/moderngrid. For more news from About the House, you can now subscribe to our newsletter. Just visit aph.gov.au/ATH newsletter to sign up.